व्रजमानं नमामीश्वरं सच्चिदानन्दरूपं लसत्कुण्डलं गोकुले व्रजमानं यशोदाभियोलुकलाघवमानं यशोदाभियोलुकलाघवमानं परामृष्टमत्यन्ततो धृत्य गोप्य।
ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। Bhagavad Gita chapter 1 verse number 43. उत्सन्कुल धर्मानां मनुष्याणां जनार्दन नरके नियतं वासो भवति इति अनुशुश्रुमा। O Janardan, Shri Krishna, I have heard through disciplic succession that those who are devoid of the religious principles of their dynasty suffer in hell for an unlimited period of time. In the previous few verses, Arjun had mentioned that the war will lead to the destruction of their dynasty, which will lead to the loss of religious principles, ultimately leading to unwanted progeny, which will suffer in hell. Now, one may say that Arjun is making these statements out of fear, that he has developed cold feet. He does not want to fight, and because of fear and lamentation, he has become delusional and giving all these arguments about the bad impacts of the war. But thinking that this is what people may argue or think, Arjun is stating here that this is not what he is saying. This is what has been told through the disciplic succession. Knowledge is passed from the teacher to the disciple, and then the disciple becomes a teacher, passes on to the next generation of disciples, and so on. This is the process of attaining spiritual and Vedic education. Krishna also says later in Bhagavad Gita, Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayoho vidu, that this transcendental knowledge has been passed through a disciplic succession of great rishis, saintly people, and Raj rishis. So Vedic knowledge is not something that can be manufactured by someone. It is only available through a disciplic succession of realized personalities. Whenever we have to prove something, we have to take shelter of a certain process to prove that. That process to prove something is called Praman, and what we want to prove is called Prameya. So in this case, the thing that we are trying to understand is that does the loss of religious principles of a dynasty leads to people in that dynasty to hellish planets and suffer therefore unlimited period of time. Now, how do we prove that this is correct? In Jaiv Dharam, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that in the Puranas there are 8 types of Praman, or the ways and means to prove something. These are called Pratyaksh, which means direct perception. The second one is Anuman, which means inference based on generalized experience. And some people also call it inductive reasoning. The third is called Upaman or analogy. Fourth is Shabd, which is revealed knowledge. Fifth is Aitihya, traditional instruction, and then Arthapati, which means inference from circumstances, and then Sambhava, which means speculation, and the last one is called Anupalabdhi, understanding something by its non-perception. This is a very interesting subject matter. We will discuss this in much detail later on, but the point to remember here is that according to our scriptures, there are 8 different ways of how we can prove something, or 8 different categories of evidence. Now, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that pratyaksh, which means direct perception, and other types of evidence depend on senses. For example, if we just look at the sun will appear to be the size of a large coin. So that is direct perception. But does that mean that the sun is actually that size? No, it is looking that size because it is very far. So our senses are imperfect and they're not able to visualize the correct size of the sun because of the distance. So direct perception and other types of evidence like Anuman, Anupatti, which we will discuss in detail later on, cannot be considered the perfect types of evidence because the senses of the conditioned jiva are always subject to illusion, error, cheating, and imperfection of the senses. So, how can the knowledge acquired through the senses be factual and faultless? We can't even see what is behind us. Our senses are very, very limited. And then they are controlled by the mind, which is illusioned. So senses which are illusioned because of the mind cannot be the source of acquiring perfect knowledge or knowledge of the absolute truth. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that the fully independent possessor of all potencies, Sri Bhagwan himself, personally manifested as perfect Vedic knowledge within the pure hearts of great saintly acharyas who were situated in full trance or samadhi. Therefore, the self-evident Vedas, which are the original form of pure knowledge, are always faultless and fully dependable as evidence. So he is concluding that Shabda, which means the word of realized personalities, which is based on what has been manifested in their pure hearts by the Supreme Lord Himself, is the faultless, impeccable evidence based on which we can establish the absolute truth. And this knowledge is passed through an unbroken chain of realized personalities, and this is called parampara, or the disciplic succession. So this disciplic succession, Arjun is saying, confirms that those who are devoid of the religious principles of the dynasty suffer in hell. Many people argue who has seen the hell, who has seen the heaven, but our scriptures say, our acharyas explain that actually there are, just like this earth, there are other planetary systems. There is actually a place called hell and there is a place called heaven, and beyond all of this, as we discussed last time, there is a supreme abode of the Lord. Now, going to hell and heaven is not permanent. Here also he is saying that they suffer in hell for an unlimited period of time. Unlimited period of time does not mean eternity. Means there is an end to that suffering. Similarly, there is an end to the enjoyment in heavenly planets. Krishna will say further later on in Bhagavad Gita, Kshine Punye Marta Lokam Vishanti, that one exhausts the account of all the pious activities and thus his enjoyment in heavenly planets, one comes back to this world. So hell and heaven are real places, but the stay in these places is not permanent. The goal of Bhagavad Gita is to get us residence in the permanence in the supreme abode of the Lord, from where one never comes back to this material world. And that knowledge is achieved through the disciplic succession. Amnai praha. Now, one may question, what are these religious principles of family traditions? These are not dogmatic, ritualistic practices based on blind faith. That is not what Arjun is referring to here. Many times we take these dogmatic, ritualistic practices to mean the family traditions. But family traditions are based on Vedic injunctions, and they are meant to elevate our consciousness to the higher platform and not pull us down into dogmatic, blind, ritualistic practices. An example of a religious principle is to offer food to the Lord before eating yourself. Another example of a religious principle or a family tradition is to offer a lamp to the tulsi plant every day, to observe Ekadashi, to chant the holy name. These are the real religious principles that Arjun is referring to in this particular verse. The ritualistic principles that are based on blind faith and dogmatic ideas are within themselves very dangerous, because they are not based on any Vedic injunctions, and they only tend to make our mind more negative, restrictive, and materialistic. The real religious principles will purify us, have our consciousness elevated, and embrace every living entity with love and affection. The real religious principles will not cause divisions, stress, anger, jealousy, conflicts, and that is what Arjun alludes to in the next verse. Aho bat mahat papam kartum vyavasita vayam yat rajya sukh lobhena hantum swajanam udyataha. Alas, how regrettable it is that we are determined to engage in this great sin. Driven by greed for royal happiness, we are prepared to slay our own kinsmen. So Arjun is saying that forgetting the real religious principles, which should preach or take us to the path of peace and reconciliation, it seems that we are determined to engage in this great sin of killing each other. And this is simply driven by greed for wealth and royal happiness. Greed is not what religion teaches us. Sacrifice for others is what the religious principles teach us. It is because that we have become oblivious to this basic principle of religion and overcome by intense greed for acquiring each other's wealth that we are have completely become ignorant and are prepared to slay our own family members. Arjun is a great devotee, and this is how a devotee thinks. In Chaitanya Charitamrita it says, Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakale Ashant Krishna Bhakta Nishkam Ataiv Shant. That the materialistic people are running after acquiring material wealth, material happiness, or they want to get materialistic liberation, or they want to get some mystical powers. All these who are wanting materialistic things or mystical potencies, they're always very distressed. But a devotee of the Lord is nishkam. He does not have any material desires. Ataiv shant. Therefore, he is always peaceful. So Arjun is saying that if we become nishkam, if we don't have these material greed for royal wealth, then we can avoid this war and live in peace and happiness. This is the way a devotee thinks, and Arjun, of course, is the greatest devotee of the Lord. This is the month of Kartik, when all the devotees chant the Mahamantra more and more. We offer a ghee lamp to the Damodar, to Lord Damodar, every evening. So please use this opportunity to engage in spiritual activities, chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and sing Damodar Ashtakam. Hare Krishna. Have a very blessed day.
आनंद कुंडे स्वघोषं निमज्जन्तं